people, how are you doing? I hope you're having a damn good day. Welcome back to the channel, and today we will be discussing and trying to replicate and recreate a very realistic version of Pep Guardiola's 4-3-3 system. Of course, I have gone and updated, put in new transfers, taken out certain players. Of course, De Bruyne's injured, so he's not going to feature in today's sort of tactics. But yes, we are going to go with the original first phase build of Pep Guardiola's system in England, of course, the 4-3-3 formation. The formation he's used pretty much throughout his career, and now he's somewhat gone away with it with that crazy new box formation. And of course, I have gone ahead and made that, so if you would like, I'll link it at the end of this video. If you haven't seen it, of course, go click on that, give it a watch, give it a like if you can, subscribe if you are new, of course, that would be absolutely damn fantastic. But more importantly, guys, we are here to discuss this sort of tactic and formation. So just having a look at the team, we've got Grealish on the wing, we've got Haaland, we've got Silva, Foden, Rodri, Kovacic, of course, replacing the likes of Gundogan, who's recently left for Barcelona. A new 100 million man, Gvardiol, he's in the team. Diaz, Stones, Walker, of course, and of course Edison in goal. Then on the bench, we've got Alvarez Palmer, who has actually started the season off very, very well. Scored in the Super Cup, scored in the Community Shield, so he has started off fairly well. We've got Phillips, Ake, Ortega, Lewis, and Akanji. And then on the bench in the reserves, of course, we've got Kevin De Bruyne. Laporte, I'm hearing he is probably going to be leaving, but I'm not exactly sure when and to who. I mean, El Nasir is putting a bid for him. I heard he's linked with Real Madrid because obviously they have a few injury issues. Militao's out for a while, so who knows where he's going to go. Of course, they've got Gomez, Peroni, and then a few other players. And I do think they will be bringing in one or two players. I know that Man City are linked with Paquetá. I honestly think he would be a fantastic role for this midfield. And then, of course, they are linked with, I think it's, his name's what, Jeremy Doku, right wing, right-footed, plays for Stade Rennais. I could be wrong with that, but he plays somewhere in France and he is Belgian. So anyways, this is the team here going forward. As you can see, the formation, I haven't changed much at all. In fact, it's, oh, what am I doing? There we go, we're back. It's just a basic 4-3-3 holding. Of course, 2 centre-backs, 2 full-backs, 1 DM, 2 central midfielders, 1 striker, and then of course 2 wide wingers. So of course, the instructions will be press after loss of position. Of course, you are going to want to retain and maintain the ball as much as possible throughout the gameplay, of course. But mainly, if you do lose the ball, you want to try and win it back as fast as possible. So there will be a nice, quick counter press that's implemented. Of course, you've got great players like Jack Grealish, of course, Haaland, who are very, very good. Of course, Bernardo Silva as well. What am I saying? This team is so stacked with quality. But you have players like that are so quick at just either quickly hitting a foul or the ability just to win the ball back, pressurize the opponents into making them make a mistake, and then also forcing them back a lot. So more or less, you're going to look to try and press off loss of position, and you can also implement a press when the goalkeeper, the opposition's goalkeeper, is looking to restart the game, or there's a throw-in, of course. Or if you are in the opponent's half and you just want to try and press them and make them make a mistake, of course you can do that with the D-pad and left. I always get confused, but more or less, you know what it's the team press. You're going to implement that stuff. So as for the width, it is set to 35. Of course, you don't really want any gaps forming in that back four formation. Of course, you do want to try and keep it as tight and a good shape and structure to the formation at the back, allowing for the offense to try and force balls out wide and then cross it into the box where you have the likes of Edison, Diaz, Stones. Of course, they've just signed Gvardiol. Kyle Walker's brilliant in there. If you do play Akanji at right back, you just got these big brutes that are very, very capable of winning the aerial duels. And of course, then you factoring in the likes of Rodri in the midfield that can come further back and just help out as well. So it does work out fairly well for this formation. So as for the depth, it is set to 85, which is a very, very high line. It does help quite a bit with the way you can transition into attacking football immediately after losing possession. It just helps with that line being super high, that you can just press immediately and try and win that ball back. Or alternatively, if you do lose the ball, you do have fast, pacey centre-backs in order to get back and more or less stop the transition football happening against you, of course. But more importantly, that line is very high because Pep likes to more or less constrict his opposition more or less in their own half, making sure that they're under pressure for the full 90 minutes and they can barely get out of their half. And of course, when you do play a very high line, your centre-backs tend to more or less be around that halfway line, I should say. So if the opposition are hoofing the ball out or up the field, the centre-backs are there to sweep up play and rotate it back into play in order to recreate the pressure that Man City are trying to impose on the opponents. And more or less what you will be trying to do when using this set of instructions. As for the offensive build-up, it is set to slow build-up and possession-based football. Of course, it goes without saying, it's Pep Guardiola football, and for this team to function at its best, at its optimum, if you want it firing at all cylinders, you need to have that ball for at least 60% of the game. Of course, it's not going to be the most counter-attacking team. You're not going to be able to sit and soak up pressure. Of course, you can do that, but with this set of instruction sets on, you're not going to get the best out of your players in FIFA 23. So more or less, if you are wanting to dominate your opponent, go with this set of instructions with this team, of course. As for the width, it's set to 35. So with the instructions and everything that are in place, it does allow you to have a bit more width in the field. But mainly, you do want your centre-backs, your full-backs, your midfield to be nice and compact, being able to string together a few quick short passes and then to be able to fire out a few long passes to the likes of Haaland or a Jack Grealish on the opposite wing. But more or less, you want to try and implement a style of tiki-taka football where you can string together 5 or 6 quick passes around the opposition and then you're through an own goal, potentially. You want to try and maintain possession as much as possible. So the more narrow you make your midfield, the closer your players are, the easier it is to pass the ball off, finding little pockets of space in and around. And it also tends to open up little pockets of space the higher you work your way up the field, because then it draws more players into that central area, allowing for the likes of a Jack Grealish, a Bernardo Silva, if he is on that right-hand side, or even an Erling Haaland, to just function in a bit more space. So it works out very well, but of course you do want to try and also keep the left side, of course, Vardiel, he's a left-back / centre-back. You want to try and keep him as narrow as possible to the other centre-backs in order to not get him or let him be exposed. So that was the thinking behind a very, very narrow offensive build-up play. So if there is a counter-attack, of course, Vardiel is not going to be as exposed as what he would be if it was set to a very wide set of instructions. So as for players in the box, it is set to 8, a very, very high amount of players. Of course, you want the likes of Kovacic running in and around that area. Of course, you want the likes of Foden functioning in and around that area. But more importantly, you do need these players around the likes of Haaland because, of course, he is going to score you goals and he is super athletic. But if he's just being overcrowded in the box all the time, it won't work. It won't work. So you need these other threats in and around him in order to get the best out of him because, of course, he can take on 1 or 2 defenders. But 3 or 4, you're asking for a bit much. So more or less, you want to try and create space for him to function in the box. And that is more or less how you get the best out of him, by setting the players in the box to 8. As for corners and free kicks, as per always, it is set to 4. Of course, Edison, he is one of the best sweeper keepers in the world, so he is set to come for crosses and be a sweeper keeper. Of course, naturally, in a Pep Guardiola system, he obviously has brought this back into modern football with having a keeper being able to play with his feet, be super confident on the ball, being able to pick out certain passes, and of course, Edison is going to be able to do that. And of course, as per always, if you are playing a very high line, I wouldn't beg you just to play with a sweeper keeper. It doesn't matter if your keeper's not the best with his feet, but if you are playing an incredibly high line, play with a sweeper keeper. It does help you more times than not. As for Diaz, he is set to his base set of instructions, but as for John Stones, slightly different. He is set to join the attack and step up. Now, of course, we want to try and replicate what they do in real life, and Stones, he does tend to step into the midfield. Of course, when you have that box formation, he is the 4th midfielder in that formation, of course. But more times than not, he does look to step out and more or less join up with Rodri, creating a nice little platform to build off of and more or less spring the attack and the offense going forward off of the likes of the Stones and the Rodri. So you do want him to step into the midfield from time to time. As for Walker, he's set to join the attack and have a mixed attack for his run type, of course. So you do want him to sometimes make an overlapping run or more or less invert and join up with the midfield. But he will be your most attacking fullback going forward, and I think it goes without saying because Vardiel is on this left-hand side, and if it's not Vardiel, it could be Ake, and maybe you can have a bit more of an attacking presence with Ake, but with Vardiel, you don't really want him hyper-exposed at all. So for him, we've gone with a stay back while attacking and become an inverted fullback, so he'll more or less look to try and join up with the midfield, but he will also look to try and stay closer to the likes of the left-sided centre-back, in this case it's Diaz, more or less creating a back 3 when the likes of Walker does bomb on forward. And of course, he will also look to try and help Diaz if John Stones bombing on forward into the midfield. And then as for Rodri, he's set to cut passing and stay back while attacking, cover the centre, and then of course stick to position. He is going to look to try and just rotate play, make sure that he's in position, protecting the back line. Of course, he is a huge defensive shield for City going forward, positions himself incredibly well. One of the key factors for Rodri being so good is just his positioning, his innate ability to know where the next pass is going to come off from the opposition, and just being able to put himself in that position in order to intercept that pass and that ball. So these are the instructions to try and get the best out of him in this formation. And then moving slightly further on, we've got the box-to-box role. This time it's Kovacic. I mean, normally FIFA 23, 22, and so on, it was Gundogan. But in this case, it's Kovacic, and he is set to his base set of instructions. Like I said to you in one of my previous videos, I do like having a box-to-box player and then not having to alter too much with it, and more or less they go by game. So if he needs to make runs into the box, he will then go do it. If he doesn't, he will more or less look to stay back, hang around the edge of the area, look to try and rotate possession. And it does throw a little bit of a wild card into your set of tactics. So they won't always be doing what you insist on, because if it's not working in the game, they can always look to try and adapt and evolve with the game as it's going on. And then as for Foden, this is also the Kevin De Bruyne role, but I've more or less adapted this to what I've seen from Foden. But he will be set to get forward, stay on the edge of the box, of course, normal interceptions, and then, of course, drift wide. He'll look to try and drift wide into that right-hand side. And I have set that because, of course, Kevin De Bruyne looks to try and drift into that area and try and whip in crosses. But with Foden, with the likes of Foden and Silva interchanging, because Silva will look to come inside a bit more, you do need Foden to maybe operate as the right winger in certain moments with this formation, of course. And he does do that fairly well. I mean, Pep has normally played him as a winger, whether it's a left or a right winger, but Pep has played him there. And I think this role, more or less going forward in the future, will suit him playing a bit more central in the midfield, having him a bit more involved in the ball to play, on the ball a little bit more. He is elite talent when it comes to his ball carrying skills and everything. So this is a perfect position for him, in my opinion. And then speaking of Silva, there we go. He is set to come back on defense, stay wide, of course, and then have a balanced support on his supporting run. So he can look to try and draw the offense and stretch play by running in behind, but you also want him to cut inside and come short. And like I say, link up play with the likes of Foden and interchange positions from time to time. More or less creating an issue for the defense, because if you're the fullback and your position is to, or your job for the game is to mark the likes of Silva, and you're following him wherever he goes in the midfield, well, you've just left a huge gap on that right-hand side for Foden to then function in with. So it makes sense if you deep it, really. And then, of course, Silva's final set of instructions is to get in the box. Of course, you do want him in the box, trying to be close to Haaland, maybe collecting a few loose balls, of course. And, of course, making angled runs into that area. And then, as for Jack Grealish, similar, if not the same set of instructions. He's said to come back on defense, stay wide, balance support, get into the box, of course, and then normal interceptions, very much similar. And of course, we do have it set to 35 offensive width, but your two wingers, they will be holding that width area, but sometimes they will look to come inside a bit more. And of course, it is a realistic thing, because I have seen Jack Grealish hold the width, spray a few passes, and then follow his passes into the area, and then it more or less allows for Ake to drift into that left-hand side and more or less hold the width. But in FIFA 23, it's very primitive, these set of instructions, so we won't try and be too technical with it. But more times than not, your wingers will look to hold the width and then sometimes cut inside. And then finally, ending off the set of instructions with the big man, Erling Haaland. I've set him to balance width. Now, he can make those really good runs where he peels off the defense and he just runs at an angle just slightly into the wider areas. But at the same time, you do want him to stay central. I've noticed as last season progressed further and further, he was really good with just making the central runs straight through the two centre-backs, with a latching onto a Kevin De Bruyne pass or whatnot. I think his first goal for Man City was literally straight down the middle. Like KDB bombed it on forward through the defense, and he literally just ran straight through the middle and then latched onto it. So we will be seeing a bit more of that, and I do want to see a bit more diversity with Haaland. So not having him just consistently drift wide or consistently stay central, having him a bit more diverse, being able to also run down the loose balls, of course, run the channels, potentially also pressing wise, he will look to try and close down angles a lot quicker. But also, more importantly, Erling Haaland's pace is elite, and his ability to manipulate the line between the defense and the goalkeeper is incredible. That space, that's Erling Haaland territory right there. And more or less, you will look to try and exploit the defensive high line from time to time. And also maybe potentially, if you are going to be playing a lower block team, you will have it on mixed, because then he will look to try and drop in, connect with the midfield, of course, exchange passes. Maybe he can be the target man where they fire balls into him and he more or less launches it around the corner. But more importantly, I have it set to get in behind, because that gets the best out of him. Of course, interceptions are set to normal, and then defensive support, he's set to stay forward, so he will be an outlet ball with the likes of Foden more or less looking to supply him when in transition of, well, counter-attacks and so on. So yes, that is the 4-3-3 Pep Guardiola system. I hope you have enjoyed this. If you have, hit the thumbs up. If you haven't, thumbs down. Big sad, big tear. I try my hardest. But anyway, it doesn't matter. I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. Subscribe if you are new. And of course, until the next one, I hope you guys have a damn great day. I'm out.